Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us, and is always an honor to have a seasonal presentation with our lovely presenters tonight. We have Dr. Jennea Wood. She's a naturopathic doctor, and we have Heidi Ochsner. She is a registered dietitian, and they are both from Tummy Temple. And they're speaking on the root causes of thyroid disorders. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. It's always an honor.
So happy to be here. Yeah, I'll introduce myself a little bit further. I'm Dr. Wood. I practice with Tummy Temple, mainly in the Lacey location, although I do see a lot of people for virtual appointments. Um, and thyroid issues are one of my areas of specialty, and it's just so profound to get the thyroid balanced and happy, and it brings your spark back. So yeah, it's something I love to talk about, and I hope you'll find some useful pieces in the talk today. We just offer this as sort of a public service to get the information out there. And of course, we're here. I'm here if anyone wants to consult further. I'm available for that as well, but I also just hope that you're able to find some valuable, useful information in this talk that will serve you well. Heidi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Heidi Ochsner. I'm a registered dietitian at the Tummy Temple, one of the partners and I'm the product manager. I'm mostly here just to help Dr. Wood today. We do some other talks together as well. And so we just hope that you learn as much as you can from this, and please ask questions, type them in the chat, and I'll toss them in when it works, or at the end, we'll ask if anyone has questions as well.
Sounds good. Okay, so just want to, give a little update on the prevalence of thyroid conditions. They're so common, and the rate is increasing pretty dramatically, actually. So the more common issue with the thyroid is low thyroid function, or hypothyroidism. And it affects an estimated 24.5 million Americans. That's around 11.7% of the population as of 2019. And when I was just kind of updating these numbers, that's gone up. That's more than doubled since the estimate from 2009. So really gone up quite dramatically. And yeah, that's concerning. And up to 60% of those with thyroid issues are actually not aware that they have thyroid disorder. Women are disproportionately affected, and 1 in 8 women will develop a thyroid disorder during her lifetime. And then this is a big deal with pregnancy as well. When the hypothyroidism goes undiagnosed or is not adequately treated during pregnancy, it really increases the risk of miscarriage, preterm delivery, and developmental problems in the child. So it's a big deal. I want to go a little bit into the thyroid gland's role. So it's a little butterfly-shaped gland located at the base of the throat, and it produces mainly 2 hormones, T4 or thyroxine and T3 or triiodothyronine. It's a mouthful. And those hormones are released into the bloodstream, and they travel all over the body and are taken up by every single cell in your entire body, where they have a variety of effects, but they're really kind of like the thermostat of the body. So they increase metabolic rate and really affect almost every body system, really every body system. Thyroid hormone plays a direct role in the health and normal functioning of the brain, gut, heart, bones, blood sugar balance, liver and gallbladder function, hormone production, cholesterol metabolism, protein metabolism, so just like, how we metabolize our food, and our body temperature, as well as just energy levels. So symptoms of a thyroid disorder, you can kind of think of it as if the thyroid is the thermostat of the body. So if you turn the thermostat up, you might be able to imagine what that might do to the body in various body systems. So if you turn the thermostat up, you'll feel overheated, be excessively sweaty, oftentimes, be like sort of your whole nervous system will be operating at an increased rate. So that can look like insomnia, anxiety, jitteriness, racing heart, palpitations, and then can result in weight loss because the whole metabolism is running faster, diarrhea because the gut is running faster, and long term, it can increase bone turnover, so that can lead to osteoporosis. On the other hand, if we turn the thermostat down, as in hypothyroidism, you would feel tired, cold, constipated because the digestive tract is moving slower. Still oftentimes have trouble sleeping, which is very unfair. Sluggish, easy weight gain, thinning hair, dry skin. The skin's kind of not turning over as fast, so the skin cells get kind of dry and flaky, and then brain fog and achy muscles and joints. So there are a couple of different types of thyroid disorders. The very most common in this country anyway is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And at its root, this is a problem with the behavior of the immune system, actually, but it's targeting the thyroid. So it's an autoimmune disease where the immune system produces antibodies that tag the thyroid cells for destruction. And early on in the disease, because some of the thyroid cells are dying and or breaking down, and as they do so, they actually release little bursts of excess thyroid hormone. Early on when someone develops this, sometimes they'll sort of swing back and forth between symptoms of too much or too little thyroid hormone, but ultimately it'll progress to the point where there's just too little hormone around. So later in the course, people will just have the low thyroid function symptoms. And conventionally, this is treated by just replacing the lost thyroid hormone, usually just for the rest of your life. And from a naturopathic perspective, that is very important. We need to have enough thyroid hormone around. So yes, absolutely, it's important to replace whatever is missing, sort of make up the difference. And then also, I'm always working to identify the reasons why the immune system is damaging the thyroid and looking to remove those root causes or triggers and shift that picture. So that can include improving digestion and absorption of our foods, correcting nutrient deficiencies, supporting people's stress responses, helping balance other hormones in the body. And using this approach, oftentimes we can halt or slow further destruction of the thyroid gland. Usually we can. Sometimes people can regain some of the lost thyroid function. I have had people be able to go off of their thyroid hormone, but that's not really my goal. I don't see it as a failing or necessarily a problem to take some thyroid hormone. And it's pretty uncommon, especially in someone who's had low thyroid function for many years, that you would be able to completely reverse it and no longer need any thyroid hormone. So, but sometimes people will need less over time with treatment. On the other side of the spectrum is Graves' disease. It's much less common. It's also a disease of the immune system attacking the thyroid, but kind of an imbalance in the immune system. And this is a different type of autoimmune disease where the immune system is producing antibodies that, instead of tagging the thyroid for destruction or damage, it actually stimulates the thyroid to produce more hormone. So this is actually a more sort of dangerous condition, and it's harder to treat because the effects of too much thyroid hormone are actually more dangerous. So conventionally, this is treated by using medications to suppress thyroid function, and if that doesn't work or doesn't work well enough, then using radiation to kind of kill off the thyroid, and then using thyroid hormone replacement instead. And from a naturopathic perspective, we would be looking for the root causes, pretty similarly. So there are some nutrient deficiencies that can play a role. Chronic infections can be part of what's stirring up the immune system. So kind of some of this overlapping root causes. And then it is possible to have non-autoimmune low thyroid function or hypothyroidism. And we'll discuss some main causes of this type of thyroid condition a little bit later in the class. Any questions so far?
Yes, there actually is a question about, someone said, my mom has lupus and Graves' disease. She had to kill the thyroid. And I have lupus and high thyroid antibodies, though. So is that different?
Well, there are multiple different types of thyroid antibodies. So it would depend on what type of thyroid antibodies you have. And we will actually get into what those tests are called. So yeah, without further information, I can't answer that fully, but yeah, maybe, maybe not. And oftentimes, yeah, it's like, it's better if you can catch it sooner and have some time and space to be able to, try some things to see if you can get the antibodies to reduce and sort of calm down the immune system. So testing, in the conventional world, you will pretty much always just have, doctors will generally be ordering TSH and possibly free T4. And that's it. I have very, very rarely seen an MD order anything else. I think endocrinologists occasionally will, endocrinologists will sometimes test T3, sometimes test antibodies, but it's, especially with primary care, you're usually just getting the TSH, maybe free T4. So TSH is the signal from the brain to the thyroid. It's sort of like the top-down control of your brain doing this like check-in loop with your thyroid of, is there enough thyroid around? Yes, there is. Is there enough thyroid around? Yes, there is. And so if there's not, if your brain is saying, hey, there's not enough around, the TSH will go up like it's shouting rather than speaking at a normal volume. And then if there's too much thyroid hormone around, the TSH will go down like it's whispering, like, okay, stop now. So it's a feedback mechanism. So that's kind of the most basic standard thyroid test, and it is a really good test. I mean, we absolutely want to have that information, but first of all, the lab range for TSH is really broad. And so sometimes people can technically be within the normal range, but actually feel terrible and have subclinical hypothyroidism. And a good way to get a broader look is to add that free T4 and free T3. And so that's the loose, the two main types of thyroid hormones, just the loose hormone that's floating around in the blood, not bound to any proteins or carriers or anything. And that's really useful to see what's going on, because the signal from the brain isn't all that matters. It is very important. So when I'm kind of digging in, I'm like, okay, the TSH was sort of normal-ish, but this person has a lot of symptoms of thyroid issues. Let's dig deeper. I will run the TSH, the free T3, the free T4, And then I'll often run reverse T3, which is an inactive storage form of thyroid hormone. So when the body is either under a lot of stress or experiencing high levels of inflammation, T4, at least some of it, will get shunted directly to this reverse T3, this inactive storage form, to conserve energy. And it's essentially like your body is under threat, and it's just sort of battening down the hatches and turning down the thermostat to conserve resources. So that will, that can sometimes be high. Reverse T3 can be high when everything else looks normal. And so if you don't test it, in someone who has symptoms of low thyroid function, but their tests look normal, this is a really useful way to see if there's something else going on. And then the thyroid antibodies are anti-TPO antibodies and anti-TG antibodies. So those two tests are what signal that this is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. This is that autoimmune low thyroid function. So if those two are elevated, then it's Hashimoto's. The third antibody that will be tested if someone is having symptoms of high thyroid function, too much thyroid, is thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, or TSI. And so, yeah, and sometimes all three can be positive in Graves' disease. So oftentimes they'll run all of them. Sometimes just the TSI will be. But it's the TSI that's the thing that's actually causing the grave symptoms of too much thyroid activity, or too much thyroid being released. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the whole autoimmune thing, because that is the main cause of thyroid issues in the US. So an autoimmune disease is when the immune system gets flared up by something, oftentimes an infection. So oftentimes an autoimmune disease will sort of get turned on or kicked into gear by some sort of infection. Sometimes the flu or COVID can do it, or, some big infection where the immune system gets really stirred up. And then a small band of immune cells get produced or start to produce antibodies that are sort of misdirected or are tagging our own cells for destruction. And so there are a bunch of different autoimmune diseases. In each of them, the body tissue that's being affected, or the antibodies, are targeting a different part of the body. So in this case, the thyroid. And then once tagged with antibodies, other immune cells are sort of called in by that flag and begin attacking and destroying the thyroid tissue, or the tagged tissue in some other autoimmune disease. And, once it gets started, it can be harder to walk that back, although it is possible. So I think of autoimmunity as, used to say, a three-legged stool of, sort of main factors contributing to it. But actually, there's been a lot of research showing that there's a fourth factor that plays a really big role. But it's, I think of it as a stool, because if you're able to change one of the factors, remove it, then the stool that's holding up this autoimmune disease can't stand anymore, and you are often able to go into remission. So the four legs are the right genetics or the wrong genetics. So if you have no genetic susceptibility to a particular autoimmune disease, then you pretty much can't develop that autoimmune disease. So there has to be sort of this underlying susceptibility. Another major factor is history of trauma or adverse experiences early in life. And that's the thing that more and more research is showing, that really plays a huge role in autoimmune conditions. And then the trigger, which is often an infection, but can be environmental toxins or, mold toxins, which are like naturally occurring. But many toxins that we get exposed to or toxicants are man-made. So that's often the trigger and the sort of one of the self-perpetuating things of autoimmune conditions. And then intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And that revs up and sort of perpetuates this inflammation as well. So getting into some of any questions? I pause for a moment. Okay, I think we're good. So some of the root causes of thyroid issues. Inflammation from any cause will certainly contribute. So it contributes to converting that T4 hormone into the inactive reverse T3 instead of the active T3 that is really what makes us feel good. And then inflammation also promotes increased immune activity that just can cause collateral damage to the thyroid. So one of the main causes of chronic inflammation, and this really is like a major factor in almost any chronic disease you can think of. So this also leaky gut plays a huge role in heart disease, diabetes, eczema, cancer, everything, as well as autoimmune issues. So this is where the lining of the intestines, which is supposed to act as a selective barrier between what we eat and ourselves, our bloodstream, our organs, our body. And so, the foods are initially in your gut with all these bacteria, and what we want to happen is to have the foods broken down into their component parts, and only those component parts are allowed in a very controlled manner through the walls of the intestine into the bloodstream, where they can nourish our body and help us build proteins and build muscle, and nothing else gets through. That's how it's supposed to work. When the gut lining gets damaged, and there's so many things that can contribute to this, stress can do it, chemicals can do it, food additives, environmental chemicals, all sorts of things. So then when the barrier gets damaged, then bits of less broken down protein from food and bits of bacteria are starting to be able to fit through those leaky gaps in the lining of the intestines and make it into the bloodstream. And our immune systems really don't like finding non-self items in the bloodstream. It's very unsettling and sort of looks like an infection to our bodies, even if it's not an infection. So the immune system activates and sort of attacks as if it is an infection. And that, as long as there's stuff leaking through a leaky gut into the bloodstream, that low level of inflammation and immune activity is going to just keep going. So many of the factors that we're going to talk about for the rest of the class that cause inflammation do this entirely, or at least in part, by irritating and inflaming the lining of the intestines. And we do actually have a class on gut healing and leaky gut. So I'll send a link in our follow-up email to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat room too.
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that. So I won't get into details of how that goes here, but definitely check that out. The very short version is removing foods and processed foods, things like that are particularly irritating to the gut, using some tools and some herbs and supplements to help heal up the lining of the gut. And then it often helps to add in some good quality probiotics as well. But there's much, much more to it, so check out that class. The next root cause contributing to thyroid disorders is stress and adrenal dysfunction. So the adrenal glands are two small triangular glands that sit like little hats on the tops of our kidneys, so kind of deep in the back, in the mid-back, under the rib cage. And they make up another crucial piece of our hormonal system. And they work really closely with the thyroid to allow us to have energy and respond to stress appropriately. So the adrenals are our stress response system, and the thyroid is our thermostat system, essentially. The adrenal glands produce adrenaline, or also known as epinephrine, in really acutely stressful situations. And that gives you that shock of energy that makes your heart race and helps you kind of respond quickly. Like if someone slams on the brakes in front of you and you slam on the brakes really fast, like that quick reflex, and that kind of goes along with that burst of adrenaline. And then the adrenals also produce more slow burning stress hormone called cortisol. So cortisol is released in a burst every morning. That's meant to help wake you up. And also it has other very, very important roles of that burst of cortisol helps balance inflammation. So cortisol is our steroid. So it actually is, quite similar, almost the same as hydrocortisone, which you can get in, it can be used to treat chronic inflammation issues. It's used topically on eczema. So our bodies make something very similar, cortisol, and it helps when our adrenals are operating well, that cortisol helps tamp down inflammation. But when we've been under chronic stress for a long time, it can be either pumped out in excessive amounts or in weird patterns, or it can actually sort of drop too low. Sometimes it can just be low all the time. So the adrenals can start behaving in sort of a wonky manner with chronic stress. And you can think of the adrenal glands and our other hormones as providing sort of like a stable ground for the thyroid to stand on. So if the adrenals aren't working well, the thyroid has to work that much harder and will be really affected. So that's one of the factors where I've seen my patients in the past need a decrease in their dose of thyroid hormone once they get their adrenals really humming along nicely. So you just don't need quite as much thyroid hormone when the adrenals are working well. And then additionally, when you're under a lot of stress and have high levels of cortisol present, your body takes this as a sign to conserve resources to deal with whatever's causing the stress. So with, too high of cortisol, T3 hormone starts to get converted to that inactive storage form of reverse T3. And that move makes a lot of sense to conserve resources, but it's another reason why stress can cause slowing of the thyroid function. And then one final thing is that that spike of cortisol in the morning actually helps kill autoimmune and cancer cells. So we really want that working well. If that's all worn down and we're, getting this tiny sluggish release of cortisol in the morning or none, or it's just not operating properly, then we're missing this sort of protection against autoimmunity. And that is probably one of the main reasons that early life trauma increases risk of autoimmune diseases, is because it sets up this, it likely plays a role in setting up a dysfunctional sort of adrenal stress response. So, as a part of addressing adrenal function, I always talk to people about a lot of lifestyle factors and, what time they're going to bed, working on quality of sleep, working on balancing, exposure to daylight in the morning and not having exposure, or reducing exposure to bright white, lights in the home at night. There's a lot of things that go into adrenal health that we don't have time to get into here. But I usually will also use some herbal or nutritional supplements to help the thyroid. So one of those is called daytime HPA. One of those is called ADB5 plus, another very helpful name. So those will be listed in our product collection, and they're just like support for the morning time for energy bolstering for the adrenal glands. And then Nerve Tonic is more for calming the nervous system, not exactly adrenal, but that really plays a role as well. And ashwagandha is a wonderful adrenal herb that has beneficial effects on the thyroid as well. So that's another common one. All right, let's see. Anything else? Nope. No more questions so far. We're doing good.
No, no more questions. I did put the thyroid collection in the chat, but it'll also be in the email.
Perfect. Okay. Next root cause is hidden infections. So in some cases, the reason that the immune system attacks the thyroid gland is because there's a stealth infection in the thyroid gland. So autoimmune diseases are often discussed as your immune system's confused, it's misbehaving. And there's a different theory out there that it's not misbehaving, it's attacking something that's there and just hasn't been identified. Attacking sometimes maybe a virus that is hanging out in the thyroid gland. So in naturopathic medicine, we really find that the body is wise. There's wisdom in the body. And so yeah, that theory appeals to me more than this idea that the immune system is just like, who knows, it's doing the wrong thing. And I have found this to be true in many cases. Let's see. So it's possible that the immune system is doing its job and attempting to eradicate an infection. Unfortunately, there can be some collateral damage to the thyroid gland in that process. One virus that's known to affect the thyroid gland and play a role in some cases of Hashimoto's thyroiditis is Epstein-Barr virus. And that's the virus that causes mono or mononucleosis, which is fairly common in teens. And most of us have had it at some point. But actually, it's a virus that once you catch it once, even if your immune system handles it, takes it down, you actually still kind of you still have it forever. You have just like a little bit of dormant virus that hangs around forever. So in most people with a healthy, balanced, and strong immune system, the virus just stays dormant and never really causes any trouble. But if the immune system takes a hit, and that will often happen with getting some other virus like the flu, or I actually have been seeing this quite a lot with COVID, that after having COVID, one of the things that seems to be at play with long COVID is actually Epstein-Barr virus coming back out of dormancy and becoming active again. So, and the thyroid is one of the systems that can really be affected when that happens. There are other infections that can cause problems for the thyroid as well, including parasites of all kinds, fungal overgrowth like Candida, and small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So those are other things that I always have in mind when I'm working with someone on their thyroid health. And that's a good reason to, schedule an appointment to do deeper testing because, it takes some guidance, some if we all had all the money in the world, then maybe we could just test every single thing. But a lot of times I'm looking at, okay, what's the most likely thing here? Which test do we start with? And moving on to another root cause, environmental toxicity. So there are a number of different types of environmental pollutants that can particularly affect the thyroid gland. Since iodine is really crucial to proper thyroid function, anything that interferes with the thyroid getting access to enough iodine can cause problems. So, halogens is the term that refers to this group of elements that all behave sort of similarly. They're all in a column on the far right of the periodic table. And so the other elements in that same column with iodine are chlorine, bromine, and fluoride. And chlorine and fluoride are often found in drinking water. And unless you use a good quality water filter, you're likely to get exposed to those. And then bromine is found in many processed breads because flours are brominated to bleach them and to increase the elasticity in the dough. And any of these chemicals can and do kind of bump iodine out of the way in the thyroid. Iodine is needed to actually, it's part of what makes thyroid hormone. So T4 has 4 iodine molecules. T3 has 3 iodine molecules. That's where the numbers come from. So, if the iodine is sort of kicked out and replaced by these other halogen molecules, that can result in low thyroid function. And then heavy metals can seriously interfere with thyroid function, as can mold, formaldehyde, breast implant illness. And there are some other, the chemical that used to be used in disinfectant soap was quite a problem for the thyroid. It's been replaced now, but probably some people still have like a backstock of the old stuff. So this is sort of naming some of the biggies, but there are other chemicals as well. So with this topic, with any environmental exposure issue, the absolute #1 place to start is remove the source of exposure. So you're not going to get very far doing cleansing if you're still being exposed all the time. So that's crucial. So, if there's mold in your home, that needs some serious figuring out and removal of the mold and cleaning up after it. If there's heavy metals, if it's a big enough deal, oftentimes people will have mercury in their fillings. Sometimes it can cause more harm than good to stir things up and remove them, but sometimes it really is necessary. So that's definitely, I'd like talk to your doctor about that or schedule a consult. But that may be worth considering for some people. Getting a really good water filter, that's huge. The water around Seattle is terrible. And really like all around here, city water is just pretty much bad most places. There's so many, breakdown products of other people's medications floating around in the water, and it's a mess. So honestly, if I could leave you with one thing to do environmentally, it would be get a really good water filter. So yeah, removing exposure is the absolute first step, but then things like doing saunas, doing a gentle cleanse, taking some herbs that just help the liver to sort of do its processing and elimination a little bit better. We use a product called Temple Detox Optimizer 2, which is sort of like a multivitamin for the liver that just sort of helps grease the wheels of the liver doing its multiple stages of chemical reactions to process and eliminate toxins. And then HepaCaps is another herbal formula we use that is gentle detox support and just like protective of the liver. So those are some places to start there. And then as I mentioned, sauna is really helpful. Electrolymphatic therapy or just any lymphatic therapy. A lot of these toxins end up kind of stored in our lymphatic systems. And colonics just kind of help with liver detoxification as well. next topic that can be a root cause, and actually I think this is kind of a biggie. This may be, I think probably all of the things I'm talking about today are reasons why the rate of hypothyroidism or thyroid disease in the US has gone up so dramatically over the years. But this is probably a big one. Iodine excess. So we absolutely need iodine for the thyroid to work. But we need a really small and controlled amount. It's like per day, we need like half a lentil worth, essentially, like really, really tiny amount. And it's actually not good to get more than that. The body can't do anything else with it. We don't have a way of detoxing excess iodine other than to just wait for the thyroid to like work through it. And so, 100 years ago, maybe most of the world, the most common cause of low thyroid function was iodine deficiency. But now more and more of the world is actually having the opposite problem and flipping into more of a too much iodine cause of the majority of thyroid issues. And so the reason for that is that iodine is ending up in more and more food sources. So, we know that like table salt is often iodized. So iodine has been added to that, and that was done initially to fight against iodine deficiency, low thyroid function. But now we've actually added iodine to a bunch of other food sources, sometimes on purpose, sometimes inadvertently, and now because we only need this really small controlled amount, we're just like often tipping into getting way more than that. And too much iodine is very oxidative. It causes inflammation in the thyroid. And so it actually can be a major root cause of hypothyroidism or low thyroid function. So we need about 100 micrograms daily. Even, a lot of the thyroid supplements out there have like 200 micrograms in them. Or multivitamins will have 300, 300 micrograms in them. So even just a supplement can get you too much. And then, yeah, so most people are getting way, way beyond the 100 micrograms a day that we really need. So the biggest sources are iodized salt, of course, but Himalayan pink salt actually has double the iodine of iodized salt. And then seaweed is very high in iodine. Seafood, dairy is actually very high. So that's one of the inadvertent sources. And that's because iodine is used as an antiseptic on cow udders to prevent infection and prevent bacteria from getting into the milk. But then the milk has a bunch of iodine in it. Eggs have a fair amount of iodine. Commercially baked goods, it can be added. And then multivitamins, iodine supplements, cosmetics. So to some degree, the sensitivity to iodine is going to vary based on your genetics. So some of us, our ancestors, came from a place where there was very little iodine in the environment. It was like inland, nowhere near the ocean. The soil had almost none in it. And so, those people may have evolved to be very sensitive to small amounts of iodine and now, might actually be so sensitive to getting too much, like we just never developed a tolerance. Whereas other people whose ancestors come from a place that is near the ocean, they ate a ton of fish and seafood, probably developed more tolerance and have a bit more wiggle room. So we do know that in Japan, people get a ton of iodine from all of the seafood and seaweed, and rates of thyroid issues are really, really high there. Often in some areas, rates of other diseases are much, much lower, but thyroid issues are quite, quite high there. So if you want to learn more about that topic and, how to go about reducing your iodine intake, if you think that might be a factor for you, there's a book called The Thyroid Reset Diet by Dr. Alan Christensen. He's a naturopathic doctor who has spent decades researching this and really digging into the research to understand what's going on here. So that's a great resource. Moving on to nutrient deficiencies. So there are a number of nutrients that we need for proper thyroid function. Selenium is crucial for converting T4 to T3. So I didn't mention this earlier, but the thyroid makes primarily T4 and a little bit of T3. T3 is the more active hormone. So that's the one that really makes us feel good, makes our hair grow, makes our digestive system move. T4 is a little bit active, but it's like part storage form, like with a little activity. So mostly the T4 goes out to the cells, all over the body, and then gets converted to T3 out in the cells. So selenium is really needed for that conversion to work well, to get the T4 into the T3 form. Selenium is also a powerful antioxidant that protects the thyroid cells from inflammation. And one of those major causes of inflammation is the too much iodine. So you can actually help balance out a too much iodine situation with taking enough selenium. So 200 micrograms is the studied dose of selenomethionine. There are different forms that you can get selenium in, and selenomethionine is the best one and the best studied. So 200 micrograms, getting more than 600 micrograms a day can be getting into selenium toxicity area. So you don't want to go too high. And you can get around 200 micrograms from eating approximately 4 Brazil nuts a day. So that's a food option. All right. And then iron is needed for proper thyroid function. That dosing is really particular to the individual. Not everyone should supplement iron. That's one of those things, you really want to do that based off of testing and only if it's needed, because taking iron when you don't need it actually increases risk of cancer and, feeds bacteria in the gut that we don't want to be fed. So definitely talk to your doctor about that one. Zinc is needed for thyroid function, as well as copper, vitamin A, vitamin E, B vitamins, potassium. Tyrosine is an amino acid that makes up the backbone of thyroid hormone. And then omega-3 fats are all important nutrients. So the causes of nutrient deficiencies include farming practices that lead to lower mineral content in food. So, over the years, our foods just have less minerals in them than they would have 50 or 100 years ago. And then foods, when we're eating processed foods that have been like ground into flours or like broken down from their sort of more recognizable whole food form, minerals are lost in that. B vitamins and minerals are lost in that process as well. So eating a diet high in processed food and simple carbohydrates, the food itself is going to be more deficient in minerals, and then you actually use up more nutrients kind of breaking down those foods as well. Dysbiosis is a imbalance in the gut bacteria. And when we have a really healthy, vibrant microbiome, a healthy balance of bacteria, those bacteria often help us absorb minerals. So when that's not present, when the gut is really thrown off and the bacterial balance is thrown off, then it's harder for us to absorb the minerals. Low stomach acid. So we need enough stomach acid to absorb minerals. And so this is worsened by, taking acid blocking medications like Prilosec or Tums or things like that for acid reflux. And we also have a class on heartburn and acid reflux. And that really gets into more detail on that topic. and the harms of overuse of those medications, and some ways to start looking at not needing them anymore. Overuse of antibiotics leads to nutrient deficiencies. Just having poorly managed Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, actually makes you less able to extract nutrients from your food. And a pause to take a sip of tea. And then leaky gut contributes, and especially celiac disease. And actually, people with Hashimoto's are 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with celiac disease. So that's often something where if someone already has celiac disease, I will make sure we check for Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, and vice versa. If someone has Hashimoto's, I'm much more likely to encourage them to do testing for celiac disease to just rule it out because it is more common. So, some things to consider would be a trace mineral supplement. I think a lot of us could benefit from that. And herbs that are really rich in minerals. So nettle tea is wonderful because it has a lot of trace minerals in it. Alfalfa tea as well, although that one has an acquired taste. All right, and then gluten intolerance is a common kind of contributing factor to inflammation in Hashimoto's. Gluten is often a big problem for people with this condition. So even people who don't have celiac disease will frequently still benefit from a gluten-free diet as a part of helping to calm down their thyroid issue. Not everybody, but a fair number. It's pretty common. So as a part of just promoting better digestion, better absorption, and assimilation of nutrients, I'll often use Temple Total Digest, which is a formula with a little bit of stomach acid, a little bit of digestive enzymes, and a little bit of bile. So it's like a triple threat, helps digest and absorb all the different types of nutrients. And then Similase GFCF is an enzyme formula that's particularly targeted at helping break down gluten and casein. So definitely not a replacement for a gluten-free diet for someone with celiac disease, but for someone who has a little bit of a sensitivity, if you slip up and have a glutinous thing once in a while, you could take the enzymes before and after, and that often helps mitigate inflammation. All right, so we're just wrapping up. I've got 1 minute left in the hour and one little section left. So we'll probably run a couple minutes over, but not by much. So some basic self-care for the thyroid. Eating a varied and nutrient-dense diet. So really focusing on whole foods, the closer to the recognizable food, the better. So less processed things, less packaged things, less, salty things, less added colors, dyes, sweeteners, etc. Rule out celiac disease, and then try avoiding gluten if you have a sensitivity to it. So I definitely recommend doing celiac testing first before starting a gluten-free diet, because the testing will no longer be accurate if you're already avoiding wheat. So once you've done the testing, start with a 6-week elimination diet of gluten. It really does take quite a while to notice the full effects of a gluten-free diet, because when it's a problem, it causes such insidious, lasting inflammation that it doesn't fade for a while. So if you avoid it for 2 or 3 weeks, you may not notice anything, but if you avoid it for 6 weeks, you'll start to really notice a difference. And then the most important foods to consider avoiding with low thyroid function are gluten, dairy, and sometimes soy. Soy can have a suppressive effect on the thyroid, although having a little bit of traditionally made soy foods like tempeh or tofu is not going to be a big deal. It's just if you're having, if you're vegetarian and you're eating soy as like the primary protein all the time, that definitely could be a problem. But I think, organic tempeh is actually a really healthy food, and having that periodically shouldn't be a problem. And then make sure you're getting plenty of minerals. So mineral-rich teas like nettle, red raspberry leaf, and alfalfa. Trace mineral supplement without iodine. And then make sure you're absorbing your minerals. So if you have acid reflux or other signs of digestive disturbance, like a lot of bloating or frequent burping after meals, you may not be absorbing your nutrients optimally, and that definitely deserves some attention. And then, figuring out the stress. A lot of times there are factors that we just don't have control over, but what do you have control over? Can you do 10 minutes of meditation on waking every morning? That absolutely changes the brain and changes stress response over time, and actually even in the moment. Can you add some movement? Can you go for a 20-minute walk most days and let your arms swing by your sides? Letting your arms swing rather than holding them like in your pockets actually helps the right side and the left side of the brain talk to each other and process stress and sort of store it in a less triggering manner in the brain. So whatever you can do, I mean, counseling if needed. Craniosacral is a wonderful stress reducing technique. Therapy, just spending time with friends and family, laughter therapy. All of those things are so wonderful, and whatever you can fit in will help. And then speaking up about your needs. I think just on a sort of on a basic level, there's sometimes a connection with, the thyroid sits right over our throat and our voice box. And so for some people, there's this connection of kind of stuffing your feelings, not saying what you need, that seems to be a factor for some people in their thyroid issue. So I think that is worth mentioning. And that wraps
Quick
up the talk.
question
Yes.
about cruciferous vegetables and if they interfere with the thyroid, and if they are bad, if they are, is that part of them denatured with heat?
Yes, yeah. So generally, cruciferous vegetables are not a problem unless you're having a lot of them raw. So especially like juicing kale, I would recommend against for someone with a thyroid issue. But having steamed broccoli would not be a problem. So don't worry about that. Those are wonderful foods. Yes, it's less of a problem if you cook it. And if you're not juicing it and you're eating the whole food, that's going to be less of a problem as well, because there's all these other fibers and things in there. And it's not just this highly concentrated juice. So hope that answers that. Any other questions? All right.
There was a question about digestive enzymes. I think you might have already hit that.
I did. I got it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Great. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We will get that email prepared and aim to get that sent out Friday. There's a chance it could be early next week, but we'll hope for Friday. And yeah, it was lovely having you all here.
And there will be a coupon code in there that is good for the next week and a half for the thyroid collection for 20% off. And if you call and make an appointment in the next week, you get $20 off if you want to see Dr. Wood or do one of the therapies she was talking about, craniosacral, electrolymphatic. It just helps you be able to try that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so $20 off your next appointment if you'd like to come in for that, and 20% off in until next Friday off of our product collection, which will have all the things that we talked about. So thanks for stating that. Heidi. I'm
question.
seeing if struggling to get thyroid stabilized, results keep varying. What are the main things I would look at? Well, I would definitely look at the hidden infection piece. Yeah, I think that, chemical exposures, a lot of these things that we talked about today. And then I've definitely had that. Uh, there are different medications. We didn't really get into this today, but I think like 80% of the prescriptions given in the US for low thyroid function are levothyroxine, which is just T4. A lot of people really struggle with that, and it's not it works fine for many people, but there are a fair number of people that it doesn't work well for. And so, sometimes trying a different form like Armour Thyroid might be worth looking at. Maybe you already have. Without more detail, it's a little uh, hard to go much deeper than that, but yeah, I would be looking at some of these root causes that we talked about, and just, varying gut inflammation. Are there things that are um, kind of fluctuating in your system that are causing the thyroid to fluctuate and therefore making it hard to get to a steady dose? All right, I think that's everything. Thanks for the great questions, and yeah, I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Marlene's Market. Thanks, Dr. Wood.
Yes, yeah, thanks for the reminder, Heidi. We love you, Marlene's. Thanks for being here and being such a great community resource. We appreciate you.
And we appreciate you. And it's always a pleasure working with you. And thank you, everyone, for watching tonight.
Absolutely.
For more wonderful classes with Tummy Temple Crew. Yay!
All right, thanks everybody. Have a good night.